You want to go from this to this and actually start playing like the GOAT Tensai himself. Well, today's video will help you understand the importance of Max and the role that she plays inside of Brawl Stars. I'm going to give you a bunch of pro tips and also tips on pros themselves like Luki and Tensai, some of the best Max players in the world. So let's start off with the basics. Let's take a look at Max's HP. So Max's HP is a moderate amount. She's not squishy, but she's not tanky either, but she has enough HP to allow her to be aggressive. Max's damage output is moderate. Most of the time, you're only going to be using the main attack to chip opponents down, but with good aim, you can actually quickly burst down opponents easily. Max's super is one of the best inside of the game, giving you and your teammates speed, allows you to win so many different interactions, and can really help you turn the game in your favor. So it's one of my favorite supers. So now let's take a look at Max's best build, starting off with the gadgets. So we don't even need to talk about one of the gadgets because it's absolutely terrible, whilst Phase Shifter is one of the best gadgets in the game, and it's literally vital to how you play Max. So definitely buy this one if you haven't already. So you can use it to dash into things, you can use it to get away, close the gap, but there's a lot more tips on this gadget later on. So moving on to her star power, starting off with star power number 1 called Supercharge. So whenever Max is moving, she automatically charges up her super, so this can be really good. The effect isn't the strongest though, so it still takes a while to actually automatically earn this, but as long as you're moving, you're going to always get it. The reason why this is so good, it's great on longer range maps when it's really hard to close the gap on the opponents, whilst your super can enable that through the star power, and if you really need your supers for synergy. So for example, if you only use Max because you want to enable other brawlers like Sandy, Nita, etc., then you need this star power. Star power number 2 is called Run and Gun. So often this is the better star power and what the pros choose, because essentially you have infinite ammo with Max. As long as you're moving, you're going to be regaining that ammo a lot quicker. So especially because you've got 4 pieces of ammo, and Max is the only brawler that has that inside of the game, you just want to be spamming out as much ammo as possible, and she secretly does a lot of damage if you're accurate. So that's why most people use Run and Gun. So Max's best maps and modes are going to be pretty obvious. So starting off with the third best mode for Max is going to be Bounty. The reason being is because she can counter so many different brawlers in that Bounty meta. Think of all the snipers, think of Nanny, Piper. Max can counter them, especially on maps like Shooting Star and Hideout. So the second best game mode for Max is going to be Gem Grab. The reason being, she's such a good gem carrier. She can enable so many of the meta gem grab brawlers with her super and everything else. So maps like Hard Rock Mine, Rustic Arcade, basically the more open the map, the better it's going to be for Max. And then going on to Brawl, that's going to be by far her best game mode. Of course it is, because Max can be so aggressive with the super, gadget, and everything else, and you can never really go wrong in Brawl. Everything seems to work. And her best maps, again, are going to be more open ones like Beach Ball and Goalkeeper's Dream. Max's best matchups are going to be snipers. So most of the time in draft, I'm looking to play Max to counter those Nannies, Pipers, Bells, etc. The reason being is because you can be so quick with your movement and juke out those shots, and especially with your super, there's nothing that Piper can do, for example. And I especially love it against Nanny as well, because you need to be really accurate with Nanny. Well, how can you be accurate if it's Max just zipping everywhere? Also, I really like Max against throwers for the most part, because again, that super can allow you to overwhelm so many different opponents. So for me, I don't think Max really has too many bad matchups, to be honest, because that super could enable you to beat your hard counters, which is the great thing about Max. Max's counters are actually pretty hard because, again, most of the time, just one Max super can change the swing of things, but the main one is actually going to be heal composition. So in competitive especially, a lot of people like to pick Poco and then maybe something with a high HP, you know, whether it's tanks, whether it's Pam, or something along those lines. It always seems to work because Max just doesn't have the capability to stop tanks and heal compositions. Also, there's a couple of standalone brawlers as well. We've got the likes of Lola, mainly because Lola can outrange Max, and also with the healing star power, it's pretty hard for Max to push into a Lola. Amber as well. It's not like a hard counter, but Amber's pretty decent against Max overall. Chester, a lot of people are starting to pick Chester mid into Max in Brawl, so that is pretty interesting. And lastly, Crow, because you've got the Crow slows, and again, you can kind of keep it at similar distance with Max, and it's a lot easier to get more consistent damage with a Crow into a Max. So now moving on to 3 casual tips, starting off with the fact that Max is a support brawler. So people look at Max a little bit differently. They think they should be getting the most damage in the game, they should be doing everything, and you don't have to look at the stats with Max. You're not going to get star player many times, to be honest, because there's just better damage brawlers out there. It's just all about giving support to your team. The utility is what makes Max a good player. So it's all about the timings of your super, positioning, and everything else on the map. Don't look at stats when you play Max.
I can see what they're doing, what he's doing. I can see it, I feel it. I is cooking.
Tip number 2 is to make sure to catch as many people within your super as possible, because that's going to be the best way to get the values. So very rarely do I pop a max super by myself, only in rare circumstances, because again, it's much better if you at least catch one person, because then that's 2 people just sprinting at the opposition. You're going to gain so much map control in comparison to just one lone max player, right? So yeah, make sure you get the most value out of every super. And the final casual tip is to understand that aggression is key with max. You won't get any value from playing passive all game, and don't be afraid to get up close and personal. So again, you don't have to be literally in someone's face, but I've seen too many max players that are just scared to make plays. They just sit behind walls too much. You've got to be ready to juke the opposition. Of course, there's times where you just won't be able to juke certain brawlers, you know, like Crow for example, but if there's a sniper, don't be afraid to at least get aggro, because your positioning will then allow your teammates to push up, and that's what good max players do. So now moving on to the advanced tips, starting off with the first one, and that's to know that max is the movement master. If you learn how to be a good max, it actually improves your overall game sense onto a whole new level. I experienced this when I was a pro. I used to just let other teammates play max, and I would just play the Gene or the other brawlers that were really easy to play. And then, I don't know, there was just one period for a couple of months I learned to play max, and I just looked at everything differently. The way I was playing after that, I think I improved so much as a player. So trust me, learn how to be a good max, and you'll be much better at Brawl Stars. Tip number 2 is to know that max's dash can be used in multiple ways. It can be used just to maneuver around the map, but it also can be used to tank heavy damage. So for example, if there's a Piper shot coming at you, if there's a B4K coming at you, if it's just any shot that's about to finish you off, you can use a max dash to tank that. Again, dynamite super. A really common one as well is nanny heads. For example, if a nanny head is going for your teammate that's super squishy, you can max dash into it. So a lot of utility with this gadget. Tip number 3 is to also do with the phase shifter gadget. It's absolutely ghosted, but it's to know that max dashes can be used to score insane goals. So in pro play, it's so vital. There's been so many crazy max goals that I've seen in competitive. So I think, again, don't be afraid to make risks. Just play a lot of ladder, just play a lot of max with randoms. Who even cares, right? It's just trophies, and just practice with your super, without your super, banking it off a wall and dashing, trying to catch this, and then combine this with timing with the opponent shooting. So for example, you want to time it when your opponent's about to use a gadget or a super, so then you can tank that with your gadget, catch the ball, and you'll pretty much score every single time. So utilizing this will really advance your gameplay with max. Tip number 4 is to know that max super can actually reach people after you pop the super. There's a small time frame where you can still catch your teammates. So a lot of the time, especially if my teammate's far away, I'll know that I can just pop the super, even though if they're not in that first radius, and then there's like a second or 1.5 seconds to get towards that teammate, and then they can still get that max speed. It is vital to know this, because there's so many instances where you might need that clutch situation where you quickly need to pop it just for yourself, and then you can still get value by running close to your teammate, because there's that brief period. It's just important to know that. And the final tip is to know that small movements left and right will really help you make quicker reactionary decisions in terms of juking, but it will also really help the aiming of Max's projectiles. So this is because the last 2 projectiles either side are pretty inaccurate, so timing this so the shots are in the center is a great way of maximizing damage. So moving right at the end is key, as the last shot is actually on the left and it's very inaccurate. So we'll try and slow this down so you guys can see it, but that left shot is so wonky. So if you're just running in a straight line, you can have really inaccurate shots. So as long as towards the end of the projectile per ammo, you're moving towards the right, that last left shot is going to be a lot more centered towards your other 3 shots. I don't know if many max players know this, but it's really helpful to maximize your damage. So we've got 2 tips from some of the best max players in the world, starting off with Luki. I'll put a link to his channel in the description. But Luki said one of the best tips is to know that the whole team can stack whilst using hypercharge, so the whole team gets 75% of their super. So this is a vital tip. It's also just knowing this, even if you're not the max player, group up. If max has a super and hypercharge, group together as quickly as possible, so then all 3 members can get 75% of their next super, because per energy drink you get 25% of your super. And it's even better if your teammate has a hypercharge and they can cycle much quicker. So for example, if your teammates just pop to hypercharge super and then you pop your max hypercharge, you can then cycle through to another like 3/4 of your next hypercharge. Sometimes he can even cycle through 2 hypercharged supers with Max. So this is crucial because this is one of the best ways to utilize Max because her hypercharge is broken. So moving into the final tip, and it's from the Max GOAT himself, Tensai. I absolutely love his Max. I'm the biggest fanboy because he does things on Max nobody else does in the game. Period. He is an absolute GOAT. So knowing these tips is essential to improve. So the first one he said is to avoid enemy attacks and apply pressure. So the reason why this is so important is because Max is so much different than any other brawler. I don't really notice any brawler trying to work the way that Max does. Again, Tensai's had so many clips where he's been on Shooting Star and he's 1v3ing. So really focusing on the enemy's projectiles, just juke a few and push him back. Apply pressure. Pressure is always key in so many different scenarios, and that's your goal as a Max. Apply as much pressure as possible so it's even easier for teammates to follow up and get kills. The next tip is to keep inflicting damage without allowing your opponents to recover. So the reason why this is so important, because it stems back to some of my previous points, is that Max isn't this big DPS brawler. You know, sometimes you can get some nasty clips, but most of the time it's all about applying pressure, keeping them low, just chipping them down consistently, stopping them from healing, and overall you're going to overwhelm them. They're not going to be able to heal up, and eventually you'll be able to chip them down and get the kills, especially with your teammates. So these are some essential tips to get good with Max. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know whether you want me to do any of these guides differently in the future. But yeah, that's going to be it. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.